Hi ladies and gents, welcome back to Miss Raga's Art Room. Okay, it is time to learn some of our pen and ink shading techniques. You'll also sometimes hear this called fine line shading technique, all right? But first things first, please, on the top of your sheet, make sure you put your name. And of course your class period. You know I always write sample. Okay, now you're going to need to get yourself your pen you're going to shade with. Remember, these pen techniques, this fine line shading, pen and ink, can be done using any type of pen, right? Those colorful gel pens, regular old ballpoint pen. I've got the Sharpie pens up there for you, but you could use any type of pen you like. Again, we're going to just for today be working with the Sharpie pen, or I think I've got some of those Uniball pens as well. Okay. But the first thing we're going to do is actually take a couple notes on our sheet here. All right. So first thing I want you to understand is we've got 4 different techniques we're going to be studying. And they go from most controlled. So most control here at the end. Give yourself a little arrowhead. To all the way at the end, another little arrow. This is our least controlled. So stippling, most control. Scumbling, least control, right? Or the one that's going to have the kind of most hectic look to it, okay? And hatching and cross-hatching, they kind of hang out somewhere in the middle. Now, any of these you can gain more control over, obviously, just by practicing. We're also going to start most controlled to least controlled here at the end, all right? So the first end I want us to start with is stippling. And we're going to begin by starting with our darkest value. Okay, so I'm going to actually take my camera for a second here. Let me shift it. Let's do a little zoom in. There we go. Ooh, there I am. I'm starting on stippling, dark value. Okay, so I'm going to start by building up really concentrated dots. Now, technique matters for this. You want to keep your hand on the paper, and you want to just barely move your fingers and make hundreds and hundreds of little dots that are super, super close together. Now, the closer together I make my dots, the darker the value. So we're going to come up with kind of a dark value. Now, our darkest value, of course, will be just shading in solid black. We'll do that on the sphere. But, okay, as you can see, we're creating this concentrated value of dots. But on here, these are kind of like our middles. We're creating, if you will, a dark middle value, a true middle value, and then a light middle value. And of course, the lightest value we can have is the white of the paper. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video here, and let's fill up this box with dots. Woo, okay. Ladies and gents, there it is. There is a dark value stipple, right? I've put those dots, those little, let me see if I can zoom in even further here. There we go. I've put those little teeny tiny dots super, super close together. Okay, building them up again, the closer the dots are, the darker that value is going to get to be. Again, stippling, it takes the most time, but it is going to give you the most control over your value range. Part of the reason that is because it takes time to build it up, right? Whereas with scumbling, it's super easy to go really dark, really fast. Here, you have to take time to build those values. Okay, you know what we're going to do next. Let's do a middle value. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your dots, and now this time, instead of super, super concentrated, now we're going to space them out a bit more. And we're going to try to create like a true, even middle value. Okay, so once again, I'm going to pause the video here, okay, and I'll see you back in a few once I've got this middle value built up. Okay, there we are, ladies and gents. There's our middle value built up. And I did forget to mention, if you need to check, flip your worksheet over on the back. I've given you samples, okay, for these different value ranges to kind of help you out. Okay, and then finally, you know what our next step is. It's to do that light value. Now we're really going to space those dots out really far apart. Lots of white space in between them. And now we have right? A light value. So we've got dark, middle, and light value with the stippling. Okay, let's come on down to our stippled sphere here. So what I first want everyone to notice is that you've got this light source. So we know just from doing our flat to round draw along that we have light shining down on this side of the object. This will be our lightest area. This will be our darkest. We know that we have to shade with the form, okay, even while we're using these pen and ink techniques. But we're going to add some additional values here. For our lightest areas, we're going to leave it the white of the paper. And for the darkest area, for the darkest side here, we're going to do solid black. So we're adding 2 additional values in from our stippling here, okay? So follow along with me. I want to first, let's start working our way darkest to lightest. So I'm going to use my pen. I'm going to start shading in solid black in a curved shape, thinning out at the edges where it moves up to where it would be lighter on the darkest side of the sphere. And I'm working with like little circles. I don't know why, that just kind of like seems to help me make the roundest form, but you could use a curved shade stroke, that's fine. All right, now I'm going to start the stippling. What I'm going to do, let me make sure it's nice and solid here, is I'm going to actually start overlapping my really dark stipple into the edge of my solid black shape. So it kind of starts blending in. I'm going super, super heavy, super, super concentrated on this dark side of the sphere. And we're going to bring that about, I don't know, like maybe 1/3 of the way into the sphere. This really heavy dark value concentrated dots emerging out of that dark value shape at the edge. Stippling definitely takes a lot of patience. It may not be the technique for you on your project, right? I want us to practice it here so you can make an educated decision about what you'd like to use on your project, right? Because you don't know what you like until you try it out. But it does take focus, and it definitely does take patience. I mean, all art techniques take focus and patience, but especially stippling because it does take time to build up. But again, most control with it. Let me just check to make sure I'm still well on my camera. Oh, I am. Excellent. Sometimes I get shading off camera like I do in my demos in class, and then I don't even realize it. And I'm like, oh no, I was shading off camera. All right, now again, as I start to work my way up towards the edge where it gets lighter, do you see how I kind of like taper off the really concentrated dots? Like tapers towards the edge there. Okay, still going really heavy, really concentrated, super dark through here at this edge. Bring it a little bit further into the sphere. Remember, if you hear tapping on the page, you're hurting your pen nib. You don't want to do that. You shouldn't hear any tapping. That means you're putting way too much pressure, particularly on the Sharpie pens, on that felt tip nib. Or if you're using a roller ball pen or anything like that, you could dent that little mellow roller ball. And then once that nib is destroyed, you got a whole pen full of ink that's unfortunately just garbage because it's not going to like come out. It's not going to work. So gentle, gentle pressure. If you hear tapping, you are working too hard. You're actually going to tire your hand out more. You should hear no tapping. You should hear no sound. All right. So I've got my dark kind of built up about 1/3. Now I'm going to actually start to space those dots out a bit more and kind of fill about to the halfway point with that middle. But I don't want to just lighten up suddenly. I'm going to kind of gradually build it out to be more of that middle value. It's going to like kind of fade out. Those dots are going to start getting further and further apart as I fade out towards the center, right? So instead of like I would with a pencil where I would lighten up on my pencil pressure, very, very gently, very, very lightly, I now just start spacing those dots out a little bit more each bit of the way. And you can see now I'm getting that illusion that my value is actually getting lighter on this sphere, which is pretty cool. Okay, now as I continue to work my way further and further up this sphere, I'm going to now start adding even more space in between my dots. And it's going to start fading to more of that light value range. And I want to avoid any hard lines, so I'm kind of constantly looking to add a few more dots wherever it looks like I've kind of like made that transition too quickly, so they get a nice smooth blend. Okay, now as I move up to that area where it's going to be the pure white of the paper, towards where that light source is, I start to fade those dots out till it just becomes the white of the paper. And bam, now I've got that beautiful transition happening. Okay, so let's zoom back out. Whoop. Ooh, maybe that was too far. Whoop. And I'll recenter. Hey, that's better. Okay, time to start moving away from super controlled to more controlled. So hatching, okay? Here's your note for hatching. Hatching is lines that are, for the most part, parallel, or I always say all going in same direction. So I want you to pick a direction your line is going to go for your hatching. Diagonal, diagonal, up and down, horizontal, okay? I like to work on the diagonal. And to build up your hatching line, what you're going to do is you just make these lines all consistently going in the same direction. The more you build these lines up, craftsmanship counts, get all the way to the edge of the box, the darker your value is. Here, I'm going to zoom in on that a little bit. Zoom. Okay, let's look at that hatch line. So again, I'm going to start building up my hatch line, kind of try to get close as I can to that darker value. Now you can do really long lines, you can do lots of little lines, but here's the key. Do you see how all of my lines are going in the same direction? They can overlap, they can come up one on top of the other. The more densely packed you put those lines, the darker your value. Feel free too to rotate your paper into the most comfortable shading position for you. Craftsmanship counts, try your best to get right to the edge of your shape without bringing that line outside of it. All right, let's build up a nice dark value. There, that looks pretty good. Looks similar. Look for any areas that maybe have like a light spot or whatnot in it. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to move up to our middle value here on our hatching. Again, I'm keeping all those lines going in the same direction. This time, oh, there's our bell. I'm not packing them as densely, obviously. Right, I'm leaving a lot more space in between the lines, and you can see already just how much faster the hatching builds up in value. But that also means that you got a little bit less control with it. You really have to pay attention because it's very easy to go very dark very quickly. Okay, just matching to my stippling. It looks like I've got pretty close on value. Okay, so light value. Now I'm really leaving those hatching lines very open. Very, very open on the hatch lines. Excellent, that looks great. Okay, ooh, I went a little bit out of the box there. Okay, so you get the idea of creating that hatching work. Let's see how that looks when we're actually trying to make something look round, okay, and three-dimensional. So let's bring ourselves down to our sphere. Once again, where we have light source, we're gonna make sure to make a note to ourselves that says white of the paper. And of course, on our dark side, this is going to be the solid black. Now the key with our hatching stroke here, let's look at our sample side for a second, okay, is we're going to have to curve that hatch line to make it look round. But again, they're all going in the same direction, right? We're all kind of working our way up and around, right? Whereas cross-hatching, its cousin, those lines can go any which way. Okay, so let's look at hatching first. Whoop. Okay, so let's do solid black. Again, I like to use the little circles when I'm doing that solid black shading, putting in that solid dark value. You can use any line you like. Again, I'm going to have it kind of curve up the side of the sphere. Okay. And then curve away. Again, craftsmanship counts, right? You want everything to look really nice and tidy. Think about it, on your project, you've created those distinct value shadow shapes. That's part of what creates the face. You don't want to destroy that by not following the very guides you've created. Okay, now just like we did with the stippling, I'm going to overlap my hatch marks into my dark. And I'm going to start building up this darker value. Again, about 1/3 of the way into the sphere.
Please excuse the interruption. We have an update about the lunch menu today.
Oh.
Due to the snow day yesterday, the lunches have changed. Today's lunch is going to be chicken nuggets, noodles, and broccoli.
Ooh, yum.
Tomorrow will be the grilled cheese and tomato soup. There will not be burritos this week. So today is chicken nuggets, noodles, and broccoli. Tomorrow, grilled cheese and tomato soup and no burritos. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Good to know. Okay, here we go. And so now, as I move out of the dark, notice again all my lines going in the same direction. I'm curving them with the form that I have here. Okay, now I'm going to start with that hatching to space those lines out more. And as it goes up to the white of the paper, those lines actually start to just fade out and disappear. Now I'm going to go back and try to smooth any of my transitions here, because I don't want to have any harsh lines or hard lines where I have that value transition. So I'm going to try to do that as smoothly as I can and go back and add any lines where I feel like I've maybe lightened up too soon. There we go. Okay, so you can see hatching, very, very different look to our stippling, but still creates value and the illusion of form. Okay, let's keep working our way on down. Let me zoom back out. Ooh, moving on. Now we're going to enter the land of much less control, cross-hatching and scumbling. Okay, now these values are going to build up a lot faster. Okay, but again, you also have to really work a lot more to craftsmanship to really make it to really make it look neat and tidy and clean, okay? Now, cross-hatching is like, ooh, sorry, throwing my sheet around, is like hatching, okay? Except this time, those lines, I should put lines here too so we know what we're talking about. These lines are now going in any direction. In fact, you layer them up by crossing or building them up over each other. Some of my students have called this like the X's, right? You're constantly making like little X's with those hatches. And so there's short lines that are just built up in any direction. And we'll talk about how this changes in comparison to a scumble. But you can see, I mean, it builds up fast. You can really build some value very quickly. But, you know, again, with these less controlled methods, you actually have to focus more because you really have to pay attention. It's super easy to build up very dark, very quick, and then all of a sudden it's like, oops, I've gone too dark. And with pen and ink, you know, there's no going back. And, you know, don't fall back on whiteout. A lot of times I hear students say like, can I have some whiteout? Ladies and gentlemen, whiteout looks terrible on your drawings. It does. It's a big old kind of white plastic painted spot in the middle of your gorgeous ink work. You are far better off if you have an oops trying to work it into a shadow shape than putting whiteout on it and trying to go over top of it. It'll actually look a lot better. Okay, and I mean, look at that gorgeous dark value we're able to build up super, super quick. Okay, cross-hatching. Any old direction you want. Built up and done. Okay, let's go up to our middle value. Now, of course, with the middle value, you're hatching. Let me shift it over so I'm more centered here. You're hatching less. Let's actually zoom in a little more. Okay, so we're leaving more space again, less concentrated to create that middle value. Now, one thing that's nice about the cross-hatch and our friend over here scumbling and even hatching is there's really a beautiful energy to this pen work. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's got a lot of life and movement to it. A lot of your pen and ink style that you choose will be more personal taste than anything else, and what you as the artist decide that you like, right, personally, as opposed to what's quote-unquote right to use for, you know, a particular part of your project. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a nice middle value. I might have gone a little darker on that than I intended, right? See, it is tricky. You gotta be careful. All right, and let's build up our light value now. Lots of open space on this hatching. Gonna try to keep it as even as possible too, while still, you know, like getting right to the edge of the box. Right, see how I'm still bringing my shading all the way to the edge of the box? Okay, so there we go. There are my distinct 3 different values. What does this look like, okay, on our sphere? Let me flip my side over to the sample again. Okay, so again, we still have to follow the form like we did with stippling, except this time, right, on like hatching, these lines can go in any old direction we like. All right, make sure I'm centered on my camera here. Again, this is our light source, so we're gonna leave this light side the white of the paper, and our dark side, there's our solid black. Excellent. Okay, so once again, I'm going to start with the darkest. So if this is kind of our light coming this direction, kind of subtly moved the arrows just wherever I could squeeze it in for the light source. So once again, I like to use the kind of little circles. Use any pen stroke you like to fill in the solid. Okay, and then we're going to take this solid black edge we're going to overlap our cross-hatching into it now. And we're going to start to build up that dark value now. Using that cross-hatching. Overlap it into your dark, solid black area. Right? We want it to feel like it's fading or coming out of those areas of solid black. And again, it's a round object, so even though we're using these little hash lines, we still need to follow the curve of the form as our spacing on these hash lines changes, cross-hatching lines changes, so that we still get a sense of the transition in value. And so it still feels round to us, right? We still want that feeling of rounded form. So I'm really concentrating these hashes. Again, my hand is resting on the paper. Right, I'm moving my hand very little. It's all with the fingers. If you find yourself, a lot of times I find students when they're uncomfortable with a new technique, they really get this like death grip on the pen. Let your fingers be loose, right? Don't squeeze the pen. That will actually make your shading a little bit more comfortable for you. Okay, and as I curve up and come towards the light source, okay, I'm going to start spacing those cross hatches out more. Till they just fade to the white of the paper. And again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to add in more cross hatching where I need to maybe fade a transition a little bit and get it to really kind of blend and fade. Beautiful. Oh, that's a nice illusion of three-dimensional form there. Terrific. All right, I'm going to pause here for a second, give my hand a break, and then we're going to move on to our last one, scumbling. Okay, we're back, ladies and gents. Final technique that you have an option to use for your project, scumbling. Scumbling is literally just a scribble. It's a scribble technique, okay? Write that down. We're not going to lift the pen off the paper, really. We just keep scribbling, 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 scribbling to build up the values. Now, again, this is our least controlled, but you can build value really fast. So I'm going to zoom in here. Let's zoom way in, and let's start building up some dark value on that scumble. Okay, so what you're going to do is you take that pen, and it's a scribble. It's loose, right? Unlike hatching, where we're doing these short little dashes or lines that we're layering up, this is literally just a scribble, just like you doodle on your notebooks with. Now this has got a lot of energy to it, this line, it's almost like kinetic. But again, with all of these least controlled methods, you really do have to have a lot of focus, right? Less patience, because the value builds up quickly. But focus, because you got to really watch your craftsmanship. You want to keep it within, again, the shapes. Now on this worksheet, I've just given you some shapes to follow, but on your project, again, those shapes, those shadow shapes and value shapes you've created are what are going to make your celebrity look like your celebrity. Okay, there's some really beautiful concentrated built up lines. Let's go up to middle value. Okay, now our scribble stays more open, right? It still fills beautifully to the edge of the box, but more open space, more of the white of the paper showing through is going to give it that lighter value. Okay, and now let's go up to light value. Really leave it very open, right? Still fill the box, but lots of open space. Okay, our last one. Let's make this sphere look really super three-dimensional. Okay, once again, where it says light source, remind yourself that you are going to leave it and let it fade to the white of the paper. Our extra darkest value we're adding at the back edge is solid black. Okay, let's finally do our last one. Build up that scribble. Heavy, 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 dark, dark, dark. And actually what works great is I use that little kind of circular scribble, and in this case it almost transitions beautifully right into, it really does actually, not almost, it does transition beautifully into that scumble. All right, so once we fill in our solid dark back edge, let's go ahead and start building up that dark value. Now again, it's a sphere, so we still have to shade with the form, right? We still have to make our shading follow the curved form of the sphere so that it still looks round. So you'll notice those values kind of taper towards the edge and build more in the middle. Now I'm not lifting my hand up at all. I'm just allowing the pen to kind of flow over the paper. Now as I move further up in, I'm going to overlap these scribbles less and less and less, and my pen line is going to start to become a lot more open. I won't even complete the scribbles, right? And it just kind of fades up to the white of the paper. Again, tighter and more concentrated where we move through those middle values. And as with anything we do in here, ladies and gents, you're not going to knock it out of the park the first time you try something. You do have to practice these a little bit. So use the borders of your photograph as some practice space. You know, noodle and doodle in the borders of this practice sheet. It will help you to really hone your technique and decide which one you really do want to use on your picture. Terrific. There it is, ladies and gents, a completed pen and ink worksheet. Remember, you have the option of using just one of these techniques on your project, a combination of 2 or 3 of them, or even all 4. It's completely up to you. All right, thanks for shading with me today, ladies and gents, and I'll be seeing you again soon in Miss Raga's Art Room.